In this lecture, we're going to have a discussion about the matrix or two-dimensional array. Sometimes they call it 2D array. So what is a 2D array? A 2D array is nothing but array of arrays. So we can have an array of strings, right? And then also we can have array of different objects, like student object, employee object, and so on. So we can also have an array of objects of type array. That means array of arrays. Let me give you an example. So let's say we have a teacher and he wants to keep track of the grades of his classes. So if he has only one class, then one D array should be enough. But if he has 3 or 4 classes and he wants to keep track of each one of them separately, like for example, he wants to calculate the average for each class so he can compare them. And then he wants to know who got the highest grade, the lowest grade, and so on. So a 2D array would be appropriate. So let's have an example. First one, let's learn how to declare and instantiate a 2D array. So just like the array, but we use 2 boxes. So we put the data type. In array, we use only 1 box like this. So to the array, we use 2. Why? Because we have rows and columns. So give it a name, grades, and then you put new data type, and then 2 boxes, but you have to specify the rows and the columns. So for example, you can put 3 rows and 4 columns. So now the total number of values is 12 because we have 3 rows, 4 columns. That's 3 times 4. Now by default, all the values here are assigned the value of 0, which is the default value. So for example, if you want to print grades 1, 2, so that's going to give me the value of 0 because that's the default value. Can I change it? Yes. So I can change that value to any other value. So I can put, for example, grades 1, 2 should be equal to 90. So now if I want to print the grades 1, 2, so I'm not going to get 0 anymore. I'm going to get 90 because I just changed the value and so on. Now, to change them individually, that would take a long time. Now, if you already have all the grades already and you want to enter them, so easy way is to use the second approach, which is something like this. So the left side is the same, but on the right side, you put the curly brackets and then you have each array separately. So this is the first array or the first row. Originally, they were like this, next to each other, separated by comma. So you have arrays separated by comma, like this. Okay, but it is better, much better, more effective if you can have them on top of each other so they look like a table, which most people are familiar with, and then you can easily identify the number of rows and the number of columns. So I prefer to have them like this. So when I have them like this, then it will be easy to tell that I have 3 rows and 4 columns. Okay, and then you can print any element you want. So for example, I can print, let's say, number 70. 70 is the row number 1. The first one is 0, 1, and 0, 1, 2. So 1, 2. So if I put grades 1, 2, I will have a value of 70 printed. Okay? And so on. You can access any, like for example, 84 is grades 0, 0. 90 is 0, 1, 0, 2, 65, and so on. Okay? Now, what about if I want to know the how many rows I have? So to print the number of rows, we have to know the name or to the grades dot length. So dot length means how many rows I have, how many arrays. I have 3 arrays. The first one is an array and the same time is a row, the first row. So we have 3 rows. So here it's going to show rows 3. Now what about if you want to know the number of or how many columns I have? Now since we have like a rectangle shape, we have the same number. Every row has the same number of elements. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So if I know the length of the first array, the first row, that would be the number of columns. So if I know how many elements I have in the first array, that's how many columns I have. So I can put something like this. Grades, let me pick the first one, 0, that's length. If I put grades.length, that's going to give me the number of columns. Why? Because grades 0 is this one right here. This is grades 0. That means the first row, the first array. And what is the length of this? 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, which is also the number of columns. So if you want to refer to the number of rows, use the first one. If you want to refer to the number of columns, so use grades 0.length. But this is only if you have the same number for all of them. All right, so now let's say I want to print all these elements. So let's say print a 2D array. So we can use a nested loop. So we're going to use first loop, what they call the outer loop, will keep track of the number of rows. So 0, I less than grades.length. And then the second one, the second loop, the inner loop, will keep track of the number of columns. So less than grades 0.length. Now, if you don't have the same number for every row, then you cannot use 0. You have to use I. That means the length of each row, of a specific row. But since we have the same number, it's okay to put 0 here. And then we're going to print them. So let's say system.out.println grades I, J, and then maybe like a space between them. Also, you want to start a new line after every row. So you want to put system.out.println here. So now let's build it. There's no error, and then run the program. Okay, oh, here we have to put the numbers next to each other, so we have to put print. So they are side by side. Only when you finish the row, you need to skip the line. Okay, now we have the matrix, as you can see, 3 rows and 4 columns. Okay, now let's say I want to calculate and print the total and average. So let's say display or print the total and average. Great. That means all the classes combined. So I'm going to use the same thing, that means the nested loop, but first I need to have a variable starting with 0, and then I'm going to copy this to show you that it is the same nested loop. But I don't need system.out because I'm not printing, I'm just calculating the total. So I'm going to add the total. I'm going to put sum plus equal grades I, J. So I'm going to start with the row number 0. So 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 2, 0, 3. And then I'm going to move on to I equals 1. Then 1, 0, 1, 1. So we have to traverse the entire 2D array. And then outside the loop, so you're going to display the total. So the total of all grades is sum. So this will show you the sum of all the grades combined. Now, the total does not mean anything. 937 is not like a very useful information. The average would be more useful for a teacher. So I'm going to find the average. So the average grade, or let's say class grade, is, now here I have to know how many how many grades I have. So that's why I need a variable to keep track of how many grades I have. So I'm going to have a separate variable count, and every time I add the grade, I'm going to increment that variable. So this will keep track of the grades I have. So now we can have, and then we have to cast it to double, so we can keep the decimal. And then the sum divided by count. So that would give me the average. So the average here is 78. 78. Okay. So one more thing. Let's say we want to calculate or I want to know the highest grade I have in class. So print the highest grade in class. So I need a variable high. I'm going to assume it's 0. And then I'm going to use the same nested loop. And then I'm going to compare. So I'm assuming that the first one, the highest grade is 0. So I'm going to put here if grades ij is higher than high, then I'm going to update high. High would be grades ij. So every time there is a higher grade, I will update high. Okay. So for example here, using our example, so the highest grade was 0. Now the first one is 84. So 84 is higher than 0, so high will be 84. And then the second one is 90. 90 is higher than 84, so 90 will be the highest grade. And then you keep going. 65, no change, no change, no, until you get to 98. 98 is higher than 90. I'm sorry, here 92. So 98 would be the last highest grade that should be printed. So here we saved it in high, and then at the end, once you go over all the elements, then you're going to say the highest grade is high. Should be 98 if everything is okay. Okay, so the highest grade is 98, and that's exactly what we have. Okay, so this is like the basics of 2D arrays, and the next lecture we're going to learn more about 2D array, how to manipulate 2D array, how to calculate a specific row or specific column and other things. So thank you for watching, and see you in the next lecture.